Okay. Okay, so you guys should get that going and we'll get started. And Nathan, we're going to turn this over to you to get started here. First of all, let me give you an introduction if I can. Nathan is the editor of the Invading Sea, a website featuring news, commentary, and educational content about climate change and other environmental issues affecting Florida. The website is managed by Florida Atlantic University's Center for Environmental Studies. Nathan previously worked for the Gainesville Sun newspaper from 2005 to 2022. He served for most of that time as the paper's opinion and engagement editor. He also covered the University of Florida in the environmental beats as a reporter. Before that, he investigated wrongful convictions for the Innocence Institute of Point Park University in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and covered the environmental and county beats as a reporter for the Napa Valley Register in Napa, California. He lives in Gainesville, along with apparently several others here on the call. So Nathan, welcome, and go ahead and get started. And you should be able to share your screen with your presentation. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I thank you again for having me, and seems like a great group, and I'm honored to have been invited to join today. Let me see if I can share my presentation. Okay, are you seeing that, everybody? Okay, hopefully good. Okay, good deal. Well, welcome once again. I'm Nathan Crabbe, and I've worked for newspapers for a number of years, but right now, I am the editor of the Invading Sea. And for those of you that do not know what the Invading Sea is, the Invading Sea is a website that has news, commentary, and educational content about climate change. It was founded back in 2018, and initially it was the editorial page editors, the opinion editors of the South Florida papers, the big South Florida papers, meaning the Miami Herald, the Fort Lauderdale Sun-Sentinel, and the Palm Beach Post. Basically got together and said climate change was such a huge issue affecting that region, with sea level rise in particular being a concern, that they were going to put aside their competitive their competition and kind of work together to write editorials on that issue and share opinion content. It was really spearheaded by Rosemary O'Hara, who was the South Florida Sun-Sentinel's opinion editor at the time, and her husband, Tom, was a Palm Beach Post editor for a number of years, or editor of a number of publications, including the Palm Beach Post, and he kind of took charge of the website side of it, and she was kind of spearheading the partnership. So it worked pretty well, and they shared content, brought attention to the issue, and they thought that it worked so well that they expanded it statewide. And so basically it asked most of the major papers in the state if they wanted to join up. As was said in the introduction, I was the opinion editor at the Gainesville Sun at the time, and I enthusiastically joined the collaborative. And as it expanded statewide, so did its focus. The sea level rise, thus the name Invading Sea, was a major focus to begin with. But obviously, in inland Gainesville, sea level rise is less of a concern. So it expanded other climate related issues: extreme heat, extreme weather, all these other consequences of climate change, but also other environmental issues as well, and really became kind of an opinion sharing partnership between all these different papers in the state to share different opinion pieces, mostly centered around climate, but also on other environmental topics. So Rosemary retired from the Sun-Sentinel and kind of took over the site from her husband. Then she decided she wanted to retire as well. They both wanted to enjoy their retirement a little bit more, so they handed the partnership over and the website over to Florida Atlantic University's Center for Environmental Studies. And the Center for Environmental Studies has done climate related work over the years, including a twice-a-year survey called the Florida Climate Resilience Survey that I'll talk about in a little bit here. And so it seemed like a natural home. And when they took over, which was last March, they hired me as the editor. I had taken a buyout from the Gainesville Sun, as probably all of you are aware. Newspapers have kind of been doing some downsizing in recent years, and took the opportunity to kind of move on to a different challenge in my career. So left the Sun, took a buyout, and became editor of the website. So with FAU taking charge, the mission kind of expanded a little bit, more educational content, obviously, and going within FAU's mission. We have videos that we do on climate related issues and terms that people might hear in the news that they might not really completely understand. So we're putting short videos together on that as an example of the educational content that we're doing, trying to do more news pieces. But opinion writing remains at the center of what the site and partnership does, and our partnerships have increased to 27 newspapers across Florida that we share opinion pieces with. So all of you are very educated, probably more than me on a lot of these climate issues, and so I might be sharing some information here that all of you are already familiar with. But I just wanted to set some things up in talking about the issue of climate change and how it's viewed and how it is a polarizing issue, quite frankly. The Yale did this survey. Starting in 2009, where they called climate change the six Americas, or the beliefs in climate change the six Americas. That there were these six different groups of people in terms of what their views were on climate change, how much they believed it was happening, how much they supported action on it. And I just wanted to kind of go over that just to show that there is polarization on the issue. The good thing about this survey is, in the time that they've done it, I think that all the alarmed, concerned groups have grown in numbers. Cautious, I think, has decreased in numbers. Strangely, though, the disengaged, doubtful, and dismissive have stayed fairly steady. So, meaning that people have moved from cautious to alarmed or concerned, but there still remains, stubbornly, what is that? 22 plus 6, 28-ish% of people that are still pretty skeptical or don't care about climate change at all. So just when one is writing about these issues, just to keep that in mind, that you are going to have a significant portion of the population that is doubtful about this issue. But then again, there's pretty much the population is polarized on virtually every issue, and climate is no different. But the good news is that Florida is inching toward a bipartisan climate agreement, and like I said, this is the survey that CES, the Center for Environmental Studies at FAU, does. There's it's virtually unanimous that Floridians believe climate change is happening. Is the good news. Even in a higher number of people believe climate change is happening than some of those national surveys say. And Floridians support overwhelmingly action on climate change, and part of that reason might be that we are ground zero for climate change, as all of you well know, having lived through hurricanes and other extreme weather, and for those of you in coastal area, increasing flooding. The climate change is not an abstract concept for us Floridians. We live it pretty regularly. So, I just wanted to kind of just set things up and talking about that this year was a pretty rough one, as we all know, in terms of the headlines of about climate change. Hottest year on record. Those hot ocean temperatures caused coral to die off, including off our coast. Destructive wildfire season in Canada that we even saw smoke down here, and then these climate disasters costing $1 billion that the government tracks. We had a record number of those, including here in Florida, Hurricane Idalia, and this rain bomb those of you in Fort Lauderdale experienced. I guess that was last spring, where it was a record amount of rain in a very short period of time that shut down the airport and that sort of thing. So I say all that because there's no escaping these things and how they're affecting us, and I think that they deserve to be written about. We deserve to be given attention. But as I'm going to mention in a moment, I don't think that's where we should stop in terms of how we write about climate change. So this is a quote that I thought was a good one. Kate Marvel, I guess, is a climate scientist who's at this Project Drawdown that focuses on climate solutions, and she was one of the lead author of this 5th National Climate Assessment. And we're seeing a lot of grim things about what climate change has in store, or how it's already affecting us. But this quote I thought was a good one in terms of the point that she was getting at. And as I could tell you scary stories about a future ravaged by climate change, and they'd be true, at least on the trajectory we're currently on. But it's also true that we have a once in a human history chance not only to prevent the worst effects, but also to make the world better right now. And I guess that's one of the messages I wanted to convey tonight is the doom and gloom around climate change is inescapable. It's real. We shouldn't shy away from it. We should also be aware of the fact of how people react to that, how the that people, eyes tend to glaze over sometimes in terms of when they get hit over and over again with the negative stuff. There's a sense of helplessness about it, that, oh gosh, well, if this is all, if we're all doomed, why should I care about it? So I guess one of my messages is to resist kind of falling into the doom and gloom, and try to focus on solutions whenever possible in what you write about climate change. So this is some research based tips on climate communication, and as climate educators, again, I'm probably sharing some things with all of you that you've heard before or seen some of this research before, but I'll just briefly go over it before I kind of get into the tips that I find effective in terms of my everyday work. Using authoritative scientific information is important. We don't want to be called on the fact that we're using sketchy science. It discredits, obviously, the message. Make it relevant. Frame it as climate as a public health issue. I think this is a good bit of advice. I think that I've seen increasing amount of pieces that talk about, hey, when we're talking about cleaning the air and this sort of thing, we're not just talking about preventing carbon emissions causing climate change. We're talking about making us all healthier, and obviously the effects of things like extreme heat on health are fairly significant. So when talking about how climate change personally affects people, I think the public health aspect of things is important to focus on. Emphasize near-term benefits, tell a story, harness emotion, convey the problem and solutions. And that, again, is I think my overarching message here, is that when you're writing about these issues, don't shy away from the problem. Don't shy away from saying we just had the hottest year on record, and the 10 hottest years that we've had. Recorded years that we've had have happened in the last decade, and this is no coincidence, and set it up. But you also set it up in terms of, hey, here's what we're going to do about it, and here's what can be done about it. That also gets into empowering people and making people not feel so helpless. Focus opportunities and mobilize action also falls along those lines. So here's getting more into kind of my area of expertise, if you will, and that's how to write a good op-ed. So, as was said in the introduction, I was the opinion editor for the Gainesville Sun for a number of years before taking this job. So I've seen a lot of op-eds come across my desk, and I've kind of noticed some things in those that I think could be improved upon, that I would suggest to all of you, that I wanted to share with you tonight. I think one good thing is focusing on one idea. Why are you writing this piece? I think that there's a temptation with an issue as big as climate change to try to cover everything, to show this is happening, this is happening, this is happening, and oh my gosh. But I think focusing on one issue really is a better approach. I think people kind of get lost when you go to a bunch of things. So for example, extreme heat is a good example of that. There are all these different consequences of climate change, but extreme heat is one we saw last summer. So what does that mean? Why is it affecting people? How is it affecting people? I think when you pick a issue like that out of the pile of many issues that are influenced by climate change, I think it's a more effective piece to kind of pick one thing and stick with it, rather than to cover a bunch of different things. Open with a strong first line and get to the point quickly. I mean, all of us have had classes where we would take some time maybe to get to our points and put a lot of supporting evidence there before we get to kind of our central argument. But in an opinion piece, the lead of the piece is what they call it in journalism, really is key in terms of catching people's attention. There are some people that think a lead that begins with a story is a good way of doing it. So if let's using extreme heat for an example, you can use talking about a heat wave that happened in a particular city and how X number of people had to be taken to the hospital. Use something like that kind of makes the problem visualized into people's head, or a very strong statement, or something to catch people right away. I think we all know that we have so many distractions in the world today that it's really hard to get people's attention. So if you don't get their attention right away, you lose them, and they're not going to read the rest of the piece. And get to the point quickly. So in journalism, they have what they call a lead and a nut graph, and what they say is a nut graph is it's like everything in a nutshell. So you basically want to get it to start with something that really grabs their attention and that kind of illustrates the problem well, and then kind of sum up what your main point is before you kind of get into the supporting evidence to that point. So I'm dealing with a very educated audience who probably is very familiar with a lot of jargon and specialized terms and acronyms and all this sort of thing. We all know what the IPCC is and this kind of thing, but the average person doesn't. So I think one of my big pieces of advice would be avoid jargon, avoid acronyms, avoid really overly technical terms when writing opinion pieces. You're writing for a general audience. You may know, and I may know what some of these specialized terms are, but that other folks don't. One of my things when I was always reading an opinion piece or editing an opinion piece and still do is if I see a lot of acronyms on there, that's the first thing I'm getting rid of. Is I don't want to see no one knows what all these acronyms mean. There's if you're using NASA or something that's a very FEMA, if these kind of things maybe people are pretty familiar with, but don't assume that they know all these other acronyms and specialized terms. Now, before giving this presentation today, I emailed one of the opinion editors of the Tampa Bay Times for some advice because I consider them the best newspaper in the state, and they run some great opinion pieces. And he gave me a lot of good thoughts on it that kind of mirrored some of my thoughts. But I think the one that I really liked is that he said, "Assume your audience is smart but lacks knowledge about the topic." And his quote was, "A good column makes a reader feel smarter, not stupid." And I thought that was a excellent piece of advice. I think that we're trying to educate you all are trying to educate people out there. I don't have to tell you this. You're all educators, and when you make somebody feel stupid, when you make a student feel stupid or a reader feel stupid, they tend to shut down. They tend to not want to listen to what you say because they feel personally insulted or what have you. So you want to make them to feel like you're helping them learn about the topic rather than making them feel dumb for not knowing enough about the topic already. Avoid lecturing and scolding, I think, is a good piece of advice. I think with this topic, I think all of us really want more climate action, I'm sure, but by telling people you better be doing this, or else it's not an effective approach. Don't try to cover everything. I think that gets in a little bit what I said about pick one thing and stick with it. Timely, but not too quickly out of date. And what I mean by that is we want to write newspapers, and news is by its very nature things that are new, things that are happening now, and you want to try to include new things or current events in your pieces, but you also keep in mind that if you're pitching an opinion piece to a newspaper and it might take them several days or even weeks to get to that opinion piece, if you write something that's out of date in a couple days, chances are you're not going to get published. An example that happened recently with this is before the Republican presidential debate in Miami, I must have got a half dozen pieces about wanting the candidates to talk about climate change. Obviously, you're in Miami, talk about climate change. They're kind of all along the same theme. But, I got some of those at once. I didn't have enough time to run them all. And quickly the debate happened and I couldn't run. I only had a chance to run a couple of them because the rest of them were out of date pretty quickly. So I think you can write about those kind of issues. The Republican candidates should talk about climate change, but you might think, well, they might not get to this by the time this debate that I was thinking about happening. So I may not center it around just this one debate, but make it more broadly about that issue so that it's a little more timeless. Use an active and conversational voice. I always describe it as if you were sitting in a bar next to somebody. I mean, might not be drinkers, but I think you'll get the point of this. You're sitting in a bar next to somebody and you have to explain this issue. How are you going to explain it to that person next to you? That way that you would explain it in the most basic of ways sometimes is often the most effective approach to use in pieces. Keep paragraphs short. I'm big for short about everything. Charles Osgood just passed away, and he had a good quote in the obituary that I saw was something to the effect of, keep your words short, keep your sentences short, keep your paragraphs short. He liked it all short, kind of that Hemingway-esque kind of approach of short, punchy sentences and this sort of thing. And I think that's an effective way to write columns too, is keep things short, keep paragraphs short. Don't, when it used to be when you're staring at a newspaper, but obviously people aren't necessarily staring at a physical newspaper anymore. But the same point applies on a computer screen. If you see a bunch of gray space, again, the eyes tend to glaze over. So short paragraphs, short sentences, I think are more effective. Scott had mentioned, I think, in an email about wanting me to talk about AI, and I think I'm glad that he did bring that up, because it is something that I'm starting to have encounter more in pieces that people submitted. So AI is becoming increasingly a part of our lives. We have these chat bots that can basically write things for us now. There are, in fact, in word processing programs that use AI to improve people's writing. I think that all of you probably have encountered students that have done this, and I think that what I would say is using AI as a tool to maybe improve various aspects of your piece. If you're trying to figure out something, I don't see I have a problem with, but I've had pieces that you could tell pretty quickly that they were written by AI. And the way that you can tell is that they're just too good, quite frankly. They kind of read like a book report almost, is another kind of a giveaway. But I think that um, it's good to want to improve your writing. It's good to want to get your point across in a compelling way. It's good to want to get your facts straight and your and your grammar right and everything. But kind of the flaws of human writing, I think, are the things that make it appealing as well. AI isn't going to have the personal story that you can share about your experience with flooding on the coastline. AI isn't going to be able to kind of recall some of the things, your experiences that you had to blend into your piece. Those are the things that, to me, make compelling writing, is the human aspect of them. And with AI, we just have regurgitated facts from online sources that I don't find compelling writing. And I think people, at least in this stage of AI, can kind of tell when they're reading AI, or tell something's a little off about this. It's a little too perfect. So don't use AI to write your entire piece. I'm not saying you can never use it as a tool to improve little aspects of it, but avoid using it too much. Emphasize personal steps the reader can take. And I think this is a key point. I think with climate change, again, there's this feeling of hopelessness. What can I do? So what can people do? And this could range from the very personal. So I had a piece today by a writer talking about adopting a vegetarian diet just once a week, and how this can help contribute to that. And some people say, well, that's silly. Why somebody doing a vegetarian diet once a week is such a small thing. Why even bother? But at least is giving people the feeling that they're starting to contribute to this thing, to solving this problem or addressing this problem, and I think that those things build. So if you can give them things they can do in their personal lives, things like composting, things that they can do around the home in terms of reducing waste, reducing their personal emissions, I think are important. And then what they can do more broadly, politically speaking. A lot of you are involved in groups like Third Act that are engaged in these democratic actions in terms of protests and encouraging people to vote, and those kind of certainly, I think, are an important part of these pieces too. What should they do? Do they vote in a local election? They vote in a state election? Vote in a federal election? Do something like join a protest? What can they do themselves to kind of contribute to addressing this issue? So again, shorter is a big thing with me. I say aim for 600 words or fewer is a good limit. 750 is usually my absolute limit. Don't go past 750, but I say 600, I think, is really what you want to aim for. A lot of papers are having shorter and shorter limits. Their physical spaces in their actual newspapers, which they print opinion pieces, has gotten smaller. So for the Tallahassee Democrat, for example, it's 500 words. Now, they're kind of an outlier, and most of the other papers are kind of 600 to 750. But if you aim for 600 or fewer, I think that's a pretty good target. And find out a publication's contact person, their word limits, their style, which is usually Associated Press style. Just sending it out there to info@gainesvillesun.com or whatever the generic email address might be of the publication you're going for. It just ensures that it's going to get lost in the shuffle. Find out who the person is. That they're usually called an editorial page editor or an opinion editor. Find out who that person is and their direct email address. Email them directly. Find out things like what their word limit is, what kind of style they use. Associated Press style, if you read most newspapers follow Associated Press style. So even if you don't have a style guide for the Associated Press, kind of look to see what the style is for other published pieces and kind of follow that style. My part of my job as an editor is making pieces in the style that I need them to be, but but it always helps. You know, people are busy. If you get, they don't have to do that to your piece. It's more incentive for them to run it. So I just real quickly, and I'm going to wrap this up so we can have a conversation. But here are just some possible landing spots. But just to reemphasize the Invading Sea, if you want a piece on write a piece on climate change, what the Invading Sea does is you send it to me, and I'm ncrab@fau.edu. I'll share that information in a minute too. But you send it to me, and I send it to all these papers that are our partners after we publish it. So there's a chance that you can get a piece published both in the Invading Sea and in one of our newspaper partners. Some pieces have been picked up by multiple newspapers. So if you send it to me, it could be picked up by the Tampa Bay Times, the Palm Beach Post, the Miami Herald, the Orlando Sentinel, these kind of publications. But I also understand that some people want to start with their local paper, and in fact might have an issue that's kind of more locally focused that might make more sense starting local. And so I've just listed some of the papers here in Florida that accept opinion pieces. Tampa Bay Times, Miami Herald, and the Sun Sentinel and the Orlando Sentinel all have very vibrant opinion pages. USA Today Network, where I came from, has cut back on opinion content to some degree, but the papers that I listed here still are accepting opinion pieces. And if you're wanting to get it in that local paper, focusing on a local issue is good. If you're trying to get in the Sun Sentinel, you want to write about the rain bomb that happened last spring, stuff like that is always good to get if you're really looking for a local paper, focus on the local. I'm not going to get any of the online options, but there are increasingly online journalism outlets. Most of them, quite frankly, don't publish opinion pieces, but I would assume that's going to change as they take more of the role traditionally newspapers have. And then I just wanted to mention real quick the conversation for those of you in higher education. I find the conversation to be one of the great resources out there in terms of written. And they're kind of more newsy than opinion in some ways, but they have an opinion part of it. But it's usually these pieces that are on university researchers writing about their research in kind of a plain spoken way that the average person can understand, but they often share opinions there too about what their research means and what people should take from it. So if you're an academic, your institution of higher learning has probably worked with the conversation in the past, so you might want to talk with the communications folks there about doing that. And that's it. Like I said, I'd like to chat with everyone. So here's my contact information. Like I said, ncrab@fau.edu. That's NCRABBE at FAU.edu is the place to get me. All my if you want to sign up for a newsletter, there's a bit link for it, bit.ly/the Invading Sea newsletter, and then most of our social media is at the Invading Sea if you're looking for us and want to read any of our pieces. But like I said, I'm always looking for good opinion pieces. So if any of you want to write an opinion piece, or your students do, I think that I really want to get younger folks' voices onto the site. So if you have students or friends or colleagues or whoever that wants to write for the site, feel free to pass my contact information along. And with that, I'll stop sharing my screen and answer any questions or have any discussion that anyone wants to have. Thank you again for having me.
Thank you, Nathan. That was wonderful. Let me see. I think this is a small enough group so that people, if they want to ask a question, might just raise their hand and we can recognize them and then talk and then see what's going on here. I know Madeline works with some young people there. Do we have any English teachers on this call, by the way? I'm just curious about that too. We'll
Yeah, and essay contests, or if you're an educator, our local school district here had put together an essay contest where I printed some of the pieces from the students at one point. I love that kind of stuff. So if anyone's so inclined to create like an assignment or an essay contest for their students and want to share some of those pieces with me to possibly get them published, I'm certainly interested in that.
Bob has his hand up.
Hey, Bob, what's up?
Hey, Nathan, good to see you.
Good to see you as
How
well.
you been?
Good.
Thank you for putting this on for us. First question, can you share the presentation with us?
Yeah, sure, most definitely.
Yeah,
I'll send it to Scott.
bullet points will be helpful. We pass it along to some of the people in our group that might want to produce an op-ed and help them craft that. The second point is that the founder of Third Act, Bill McKibben, he's got a newsletter blog that he publishes quite often, and usually in it, he references something or a lot of different points of view from different parts of the country. So my question is there anything wrong with him kind of referencing something that might have been published out of Invading Seas? Of course, he'll give appropriate attribution, but
well, sir, I would love for Bill McKibben to cite anything from the Invading Sea. He cited, we ran a Q&A with what's his name, Jeff Baradelli, the meteorologist out of Tampa, not so long ago, that he cited some of his answers from that in one of his newsletters that I was thrilled to see. So yeah, please share away.
okay. All right. And then another one of the techniques that I was taught years ago to start a compelling conversation with people was to start off with something to the point of "Did you know?" Give them a "Did you know?" and then some sort of a fact. Is that still relevant, or is that kind of old school? So you can see I'm kind of old school.
Gosh, did you know? Well, I mean, could you think of an example of how that did you know about climate change that might be effective?
Yeah, so just like did you know that um, a $1 million in a bank that finances climate change produces X amount of carbon emissions?
I like it. I mean, yeah, I think that in that example, it makes sense. I mean, certainly giving people information of things that they don't know that are compelling, I think can be effective. Yeah, I mean, I'm familiar with what Third Act's doing in terms of the banking system, and I think that off the top of my head, one of the things that I would wonder about that is how for the average person, how do you make that connection? Well, what do you mean? Why should I be protesting my bank over climate change? So if you can give an example that makes that connection for them right away, I think that's an effective way of starting off a piece for sure.
Yeah, I think just my thought is that a lot of people don't recognize that the money that is sitting in a bank account may be more damaging to the climate than their air travel, for instance.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I think that they might have seen you in front of you guys in front of Bank of America or whatever, and wonder what the heck is that about. So answering what the heck is that about, or did you know, as you framed it, I think sounds like a great way to start a piece.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks. That gives us some ideas of what to work on.
Thank you. And I wanted to, before answered another question, I wanted to note what Eileen said here in the chat about a video contest for students this topic. I'm also we're also interested in multimedia pieces for the Invading Sea. I think that any of you who have young children or grandchildren know that they are spend a lot of time on TikTok and that sort of thing, looking at videos and reading op-eds is not necessarily going to reach them. So we're, like I mentioned at the top, doing these bite-sized videos on climate-related terms to try to get to that audience. But I'd certainly be open to ideas for video essays or some sort of video presentation as well. So if somebody has an idea for something video-related that they might submit to the site, I'm all ears for that too. I
And
guess
I'll pass along your info to Oakland Nature Preserve.
great,
And
thank you.
what they do, I know they have the stuff from last year, but they have the contest going on this year, and they've got 20,000 in scholarship money to help pique the interest of the students.
Fantastic. Well, thank you. Is that Leah? Is that your name?
It is. Thank
Hey,
you.
Leah.
Yes, thank you, Nathan. I just wanted to point out something to you. The Broward Sierra Group has a junior team of high schoolers that are 14 to 18 years old. And what they have found when they have written op-eds and they have gotten published is if they start out their first sentence saying that I am a high schooler, age whatever, but don't cut me off because, and they have gotten mail as a result of that. The fact that they're young really gets the ear of the older generation when they say, we're going to be dealing with what you guys did for years after you guys are not around. So here's what we would like to hear from you. And they have not only gotten printed frequently as a result of stating their age and what their topic is and why they're writing it and why they're concerned. And a lot of things have happened as a result of that. Their parents have gotten involved, which never would have happened before they got answers to their op-ed. So that's one thing I wanted to point out.
Nice.
The second thing is that the club is having an Earth Day event in March where we're going to have an art contest for high schoolers 14 to 18 years old to further their education. And it's going to be on plastic waste and waste materials. And they do have to write an essay of what they learned about how unhealthy buying single-use plastic is and why, and then create an art piece. And the prize money ranges from $250 to $1,000. So these kind of things open up doors to not only the kids doing it, but their classes, their schools, their parents, their families. So the more that the kids get involved and can write op-eds or write to you and have you publish something, I think really opens the eyes of the public.
Well, I really appreciate your comments and couldn't agree more. I think that I have an enormous faith in the power of young people to cause change on this issue. I'm anxious for them to gain some political power because I think they have their heads on straight about a lot of this, a lot more than some of us older folks do. And as far as reaching people through these different methods like art, I think it's a fantastic idea. There's that climate artist down in Miami, Xavier Cortada, who's kind of pioneered using.
He's going to be one of our judges, by the way.
Fantastic. Yeah, I mean, he really has pioneered some of this, but there's a lot of great artists down there. I went to the Climate Summit a couple months ago where they had various climate art there. And it really is, we got to think of different ways of reaching people. And I think that art affects people in such an emotional way and resonates with people that if art can reach them and if you can have young people doing that art, all the better as far as I'm concerned. So thank you for that. And I'd be interested, in publishing maybe a winner for that contest or something like that if you want to get in touch with me about that.
Oh, absolutely. And by the way, we have 3 high schoolers from the team that are right now up in Tallahassee going to talk to our legislators about what they're worried about. So, and they have an impact. They went last year, and some of the adults that went said they listen to the kids more than they listen to us. So, yeah. They do open a lot of doors, and they did get some things actually done last year as a result of speaking to 2 of our legislators who got some things published and went to committee and got approved. So,
well, that's great.
It's great.
So yeah, I mean, I think Scott mentioned the early on that the Clio folks are up in Tallahassee, and yeah, I mean, there's great groups like that. I mean, it's really intergenerational. Having from third act to the younger folks in Clio, it's great to see people of all ages engaged on this issue.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your input.
Well, thank you.
Eileen's got her hand up.
Yeah, I've got another thing that it's not totally climate change, but it's of interest to me. In 1986, there was the Florida Environmental Education Act that was put into act, and eventually it sunsetted. I would like to see the state of Florida either reinstitute that act, obviously with some changes, to get some environmental education within the school system, within the community and families. When that act was going on, we had support within each school district. Teachers had support for training and stuff like that. Most of the teachers who were involved in that have retired and left. And you're dealing with new teachers that know nothing about environmental ed. They know nothing about the resources or how to do it. And there were 5 regional service projects that helped do it. There were a lot of non-formal in that. And I know I spoke to Representative Trunauer in our area and Senator Baxley about it last fall. and they seem to be in favor of doing something. Now, whether they're continuing on with it, but I would like to get the word out somewhere that people need to say, we need to do something back with having an Environmental Ed Act in Florida to support that. And it, with this, that's one way climate education can also take place too, because obviously that would be one of the main environmental ed focuses that we need to have. But I can look at wild and PLT and wet and some of the programs that are out there, and they're faltering because people are no longer teaching. They've gone on to other things and gotten busy in their lives. And I don't know if I can send you something. I know I did a little sheet for our legislative delegation about the history of the Environmental Ed Act when it was there and why we still need it. In fact, more importantly, why we need it now. That's just like a little too over your 750 words.
Well, I think you could boil it down. I think it's a great topic,
Yeah.
and I was actually looking up for some survey data that I wanted to share with you. But I think it's an excellent topic. I'd certainly be interested in wanting to know more about it. And if you could boil it down to an opinion piece, I think right now we're in a kind of a difficult environment in terms of the teaching of climate change related topics. Certainly, I think that some of you might have seen in the news in the last several months some of these, I think PragerU, they call it, videos that are kind of more climate skepticism being allowed to be included in classrooms. So, that might be a jumping off point for saying that there might be a different approach to environmental education than that. The stat that I wanted to share to you, and I know you're more broadly talking about environmental education, but just to specifically focus on climate change, that survey that I mentioned, how strongly do you support or oppose the following statement? Florida schools should teach the causes, consequences, and solutions to climate change in K through 12 classrooms. More than 2/3 of the respondents said either they strongly support or support that statement. So I think there's a lot of public support for this kind of education. So to your point, I think that reviving that act or reviving some sort of approach like that seems to make a lot of sense, and I would encourage you to write about it.
Yeah, it worked before. Obviously, with times you have to tweak some things, but we don't have to start from scratch. We can start doing something. I know, Martha, you were involved with the regional service projects and all that way back when and everything. And, it wasn't perfect, but it got a lot of environmental ed out in the field and going on with it. And we just have to do something in Florida. We've got issues coming that we need to deal with.
And I think it's such a great. We have obviously a classroom, the classroom that is the natural world of Florida is such an amazing thing. I know when I came down here, I was as a kid I was used to the amusement parks and beaches, and since becoming an environmental reporter, so much being exposed to so many great natural areas, it springs up here in North Florida, that I think that getting kids out into those areas and writing about ways to kind of expose them to the natural world of Florida is a wonderful thing.
Martha, I don't know if you had anything to do with getting that act in place in the first place. It was 86. That was before I was here doing that kind of work. So I don't know if you had a hand in that, and I don't know what the politics of getting an act like that would be, but I don't know if the atmosphere is good for that nowadays or not.
No, I wasn't in Florida when it was first passed. I came when it was in its heyday. And that was back when almost every agency had environmental education staff of some sort. Department of Transportation, all the water management districts, DEP, Department of Ed, the Florida Forest Service, everybody had education as part of what they did, and they all supported teachers. And it was really, it was wonderful because you could have information from lots of different perspectives, and it was what we want. And little by little, governors have eroded the process and told everybody, all the agencies, that they shouldn't be doing education unless it's in their name. So basically they all quit, and Department of Ed lost their Office of Environmental Ed. So it just all went away.
Senator McPherson was the one who championed that act when it was passed way back when. And again, it required state agencies to do environmental ed and to meet and network in that. So it was good that it also had recognition through the governor's office for environmental education groups that were doing that throughout the state, which gave a lot of PR and publicity to the fact that things were going on in Florida that were right. The Office of Environmental Ed, both in DEP and DOE, were instrumental in a lot of the stuff that really helped. The thing they left out was they weren't touching families in the community, which we can't do just schools. We can't wait for them to get old enough to vote. We need to have ways through your non-formal nature centers and museums and things to touch families and communities and that. And I know with us, when I do Wet, Wild, and PLT, and I do the combined climate change, the teachers are hungry for it. They just don't know where to go get it and what to do with it.
Yeah, I mean, and just one thing I wanted to say before this session was over is, the Invading Sea is a nonpartisan site, and quite frankly, the state has a long history of bipartisan action on environmental issues. I think some of our great land conservation programs were championed by both the Republican and Democratic governors. So I think that this is an issue that traditionally has been one that both sides of the aisle people care about, and I think environmental education also falls under that. So maybe you'd find some people wanting to bring that back.
Martha.
So Nathan, I was wondering, as you're sending out information through Scott to the whole group, I wonder if you could either, I mean, the easy thing to do would be to send the results of the survey, but if you have more time, or if you aren't allowed to do that, if you could extract those factoids that could support an op-ed piece, like the support across the state for agencies to be doing something in climate change, the support for schools to be doing something about environment or climate change. And those are facts that people ought to know.
Well, the good thing is that our site, if you look at the very top of it, it's news, commentary, multimedia, and public opinion. So under that public opinion section, we have both a press release kind of giving the highlights of the survey, but then you can click on there and get the more detailed information on the survey. So I'd be happy to share the link to that. But yeah, all that information is there, and it really is in terms of and showing about the bipartisan nature of some of these issues. As of all the things, there's a lot of things to be depressed about, a lot of things to be worried about in terms of polarization. I get that, but I also think that there is some movement on this issue in terms of I'm hearing from more and more conservative groups that are dedicated to climate and energy issues that want to get their voices out there too. So I think we all are in danger of being in our own silos and preaching to the choir, if you will, on this. So I think that I think everyone should make an effort to speak to different audiences. And something I probably should have included in the presentation is there are different messages that resonate with more conservative audiences in terms of things like solar helping with energy independence, solar helping with jobs. I think that there are these things that we should often think about how am I going to convince people that aren't necessarily out there protesting on these issues, but might be an ally on these issues to kind of join the cause. And I think there are some economic arguments and other arguments that are appealing to both sides of the aisle that people should consider when writing things.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Great. Liliana, do you haven't had any questions for Nathan? Or do you have any thoughts or questions you wanted to ask?
I'm listening to all this, and I'm a clear speaker, and my approach, Scott, I'm working in preparing presentations for common people. I mean, for the regular people, which is what Clio does. And my approach with the people, it will be to talk about for the people that are kind of disbelievers and that percentage of the population that is not engaged, that are not very. I'm going to talk about people my age that probably, I mean, they are not engaged for one reason or another. I think that talking about economic things is what is going to get their attention. I mean, talking about health issues, I mean, what are the problems that we are facing with this infrastructure? How much is the taxes? I mean, we have a wonderful opportunity now with insurances, with the dismay,
Yes.
with this problem that we have, this economic thing that is going on. Everybody is suffering, and there is a lot of concern. I mean, we have a lot of things on the line. So I prepared. I'm still working in the presentation because I wanna be able to reach with a simple language. I think that what you say, Nathan, about talk in a simple language, that is going to engage people. Because if you go with the scientific data and all this stuff, you lost the people. I mean, so we are in contact with groups that have really, really good approaches to that, like the ocean people, Scott, that they have really a complete set of things that can be used. I mean, the fact of the matter with all the information is that it has to be concise and it has to be given in a short time. So, because if not, you lose the audience. And my idea was always, Cleo work a lot with young people, which I agree with you, Nathan. I mean, they are the future. I mean, I don't see the time to see them more in politics. And they're very, very active. But there is this, when you work with young people, also you find people that are a lot in activists, and then you have to balance that stuff. Because you are not going to convince people. I'm part of a committee in my city, and young people, I understand, I mean, the frustration and all this stuff, but sometimes you have to negotiate things. We know that. So there is a lot of, this is a very complex issue, and there is a lot of opportunities. If you use a lot of, my main thing with my presentations is to be able to approach and to talk about this with a good message that is not super depressive, because I feel depressed many times. Yeah. So if we approach the communities with this, I mean, people has enough problems. I mean, they don't want to listen to. I got
well, climate anxiety is an issue that's been really focused on young people, so they're feeling this too.
Oh yeah.
So absolutely,
and I don't blame them. I mean, nothing to blame them, but this is an effort that we have to work together. There is no way. Everybody has to be involved in this. I mean, there is no time for ideologies, or, I mean, we have real problems. and I think that everybody can have different ideologies or go with this or with that, but I mean, we have real problems that we have to solve.
Sure.
And that should be the main thing.
Well, I thank you for your comments. I think one thing that you said that I wanted to echo is this idea that property insurance is being an issue that any of us homeowners are really feeling pretty dramatically, and you talk about things that affect people's lives personally that they really care about, and for homeowners it's pretty high on the list of worrying about. I got dropped by my insurance company, and I'm here, I'm in Gainesville, and I think a lot of people are really worried about that right now. So I think that there, those kinds of pocketbook issues, I think that people might think climate change is abstract, or if they're inland, then they're not going to have to worry about things like rising sea levels. But once they lose their insurance, it kind of brings it home to them pretty quickly. So I think that's an example of an issue that you can resonate with people.
This is going to affect everybody, because property values are going to go really big time affected. My background is in real estate. I cannot tell you what I think about this in really, really deep opinion. But everybody is affected, everybody. And this is what I think as educators at different levels. I know that it's not easy, but this is what the message should be, that we are all affected. Young people is affected too, because let's face it, many young people, they are concerned, but they are not too much into the, when you see the behaviors, when you see the way that we are all the result of this time of a lot of information, a lot of Amazon, a lot of, but yeah, if we can come to the table and recognize that this is everybody's problem, and that we can do things, even a small changes, can, if a lot of people do that, I mean, it can be done. I think that we have something to improve, and also from the realistic point of view, that it's not going to be perfect, because it's not going to be perfect, and it's not going to be from today to tomorrow. It's a gradual thing. Yeah, we have a sense of urgency, but I think that we have to work with realities, and well, look at what happened with recycle. Too many things together. But that's what we are trying to do to help.
Well, thank you, Liliana. We're kind of up against our 8 o'clock time here and so I'm gonna wrap it up in a minute here, and thanks, Nathan, so much. I really want to make sure, that list you gave on the tips on op-ed writing tips was amazing, and I want to make sure we get some English teachers to look at that, because I think they would probably love to take that and create a whole series of lessons on using that list that you got. Before I go, I do want to share out, you mentioned climate anxiety, and actually our speaker next month, and I want to just see if I can show this slide real quick, just to show people that, and we'll have a couple of presenters on the climate crisis and student mental health next month, which will be, I think, intriguing for a lot of folks, educators, to sort of grapple with that. And Nathan, you probably have seen some of the polls about some of the climate anxiety nationwide among young people is pretty high. So I think this will be a good one for us to kind of talk about.
Are they Florida based, the two folks?
No, they are not.
Oh, okay. Just wondered. Yeah, that sounds like a great topic.
Yeah, we'll see if we can, they may be able to identify some folks for us, but I just wanted to show that to everybody, and I'll make sure everybody gets I'll send that out with the follow-up email. But again, I want to thank you again so much, Nathan, for your time and putting together the presentation. And I got a lot of good ideas now from what you said, and I hope some of us here will share some of those and put some editorials together in the next few months. And
I hope so too. And Crabbe at FEU.edu. I'd love to get pieces from all of you. I appreciate everyone that asked questions and participated in tonight's event. It was an honor to speak to this group.
Great. Well, thank you. Hope to see everybody again next month. Thanks again.